To the Point with Michael Williams.
Good morning. I want to begin this day with a focus on Human Trafficking Awareness Month nationwide. People trafficked and exploited for sex or labor. And yes, it does happen here. Just one example, the National Human Trafficking Hotline said in 2021, the latest numbers I could find, more than 1,100 victims or survivors of human trafficking reached out to its hotline in Florida. Those are just the numbers we know. I talked to Palm Beach County State Attorney Dave Aronberg this week.
Human trafficking is a real issue. I hear about it all the time. And in Florida, we're number 3 when it comes to cases of human trafficking. But that's also because of our large population. We're 3rd in the country in population. But Florida has some unique challenges in that we have a large agricultural base, so that unfortunately attracts labor traffickers. You also have in our region 3 major airports, international airports, that are hubs for people to come in for all sorts of reasons. And sometimes when you have individuals who come in from out of country to be labor trafficked here, they are the least likely to report it because they often don't speak the language. They come from countries where law enforcement is not their friend. And so they are really scared to speak up.
Talk about the cases you've seen and the task force that we have here in Palm Beach County to combat this.
Yeah, we didn't have many cases until Sheriff Bradshaw was able to secure a federal grant that established a human trafficking task force with our agency, with law enforcement, local, state, and federal levels. And we meet in a secret, undisclosed location in the county where we root out this evil. It's not just being passive. We are active, proactive in going on the internet and finding these individuals who would groom young people and otherwise commit modern day slavery. That's what this is. And there's misconceptions about what human trafficking is. And I think it's important for people to know that what you hear about out there from politicians isn't always the truth. It's less about smuggling and taking young people across the southern border with duct tape and rope. It's less about transportation as it is about exploitation. What we found is that human trafficking will occur in your own home where a child is groomed over the internet. So while the parents may be looking for the duct tape and the rope across the southern border, in reality, they may not realize that their child is talking to an older predator online inside their own home.
Mr. Aronberg said last year the task force in Palm Beach County had 76 investigations into sex and labor trafficking, 21 arrests and 10 convictions, which can be life felonies. Public awareness, he said, is key.
The issue is that we want the public to know what human trafficking is so they can say something if they see something, because our prosecutors depend on people out there to speak up to law enforcement and alert us, because the victims of human trafficking are unlikely to speak up themselves. And so if you're in the nail salon and someone is working and is living in the back room and is afraid to look at you in the eye and is not allowed to handle the cash, those are red flags for potential human trafficking. If you're at a school and you see a student from a rough background all of a sudden show up with jewelry and a new older boyfriend who has his name tattooed on her, those are telltale signs of modern day slavery.
I will continue to profile this topic with a special report tomorrow with a group traveling the state to bring awareness to this, the Hope Ride for Freedom. And I'll have more on that tomorrow. To politics now, Brian Crowley will join me in just a moment. First, a look, though, at Governor Ron DeSantis and former South Carolina governor and U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley. They squared off. Former President Donald Trump did not attend, trying in their debate to prove to Iowans last week and Republicans nationwide that they are alternatives to Mr. Trump.
Spent more money on private planes than he has on commercials trying to get Iowans to vote for him. If you can't manage a campaign, how are you going to manage a country?
We don't need another mealy-mouthed politician who just tells you what she thinks you want to hear just to try to get your vote, then to get in office and to do her donors' bidding.
Barring a major surprise on Monday, the 2 presidential hopefuls are effectively in a race for second place in Iowa. Former President Trump has maintained a commanding lead in the polls despite skipping every debate so far.
I wish Donald Trump was up here on this stage. He's the one that I'm running against. He's the one that I wish would be here. He needs to be defending his record.
Instead of facing his fellow candidates, Trump faced questions in a nearby Fox News town hall.
I am not going to be a dictator. I'm going to manage like we did We were so successful that the country was coming together. It was actually coming together and coming together well. It was a beautiful thing to see, and we're going to do that again.
Hours before the debate, a major update. Former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie ending his New Hampshire-focused campaign. Other GOP candidates are trying to keep their campaigns afloat. Asa Hutchinson told Iowans, "I'm still running." And Vivek Ramaswamy, who did not qualify for Wednesday's debate, told Scripps News he believes the polls are rigged and is expecting a strong showing for his campaign.
The bar for me is shatter those media expectations, shatter the fake polling expectations that have been set. What they've done is a disservice, has actually been a favor, and on January 15th, you're going to see a victory for this campaign.
Strong performance in Iowa on Monday could give Haley or DeSantis the inside lane to become the alternative to former President Trump ahead of the next primary contest in New Hampshire. Nathaniel Reed, Scripps News, Des Moines, Iowa.
Here now with my old friend and political expert, Brian Crowley, longtime political reporter for the Palm Beach Post, covered Tallahassee extensively and keeping all eyes and everything political this year for us. Brian, happy 2024, my friend. Break it all down for us, what you've heard.
Well, the one thing is we can definitely ignore when it comes to the caucuses on Tuesday is the polls. Yeah. Now, it's not just my hatred of polls. With this blizzard that's coming in this weekend, with Monday, they're expecting high temperatures of being minus 14. As has happened so much in recent elections, we have this unexpected phenomenon that's certain to have some impact on turnout. I don't know who it's going to impact more, but it's definitely going to have some kind of an impact. You know, a lot of the people who support Donald Trump might decide that if polling is correct and he's got 50% more of the polls, why am I trying to go out into this horrible storm
to caucus
when he's going to win it anyway? We'll see. Does DeSantis really have the kind of ground game in all 99 counties that will get him to bring just enough people out to have a decent showing? We'll see. But this storm is one of those many things we've had in election cycles lately, completely unexpected and unpredictable.
There was some late polling last week suggesting that Nikki Haley might be eclipsing former or Florida Governor, Ron DeSantis in Iowa polling. Bottom line, if the numbers hold true, Trump has a sizable victory. How commanding, we'll have to wait and see. If Nikki Haley were to best Governor DeSantis in Iowa, is the governor finished?
Well, it'll be a lot more difficult for Governor DeSantis to move forward if he gets really hammered in Iowa. If it turns out to be really close between the two of them, maybe. You know, a week after Iowa, we have New Hampshire.
Right.
There are indications that Nikki Haley is doing very well in New Hampshire. Governor Sununu has supported Nikki Haley in New Hampshire. So Ron DeSantis could be in trouble in New Hampshire. He hasn't put in the kind of effort there. He kind of went all in on Iowa. We'll see. But again, you know, what happens to Donald Trump along the way? We have to remember, too, that this is picking delegates. Mm-hmm. And even when you get done with Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, and Nevada, it's a small fraction of the number of delegates that are needed to win. It won't be until we get to March, into Super Tuesday, where the bulk of the delegates will start being selected. And apparently Donald Trump's team has done a lot of groundwork in working on the delegate selection process. So that could be interesting, too.
And, of course, Florida, March 19th, and we'll have Super Tuesday that will roll into. Florida, not part of the Super Tuesday group, so that'll be interesting. New Hampshire, interesting, too, and you've covered it many, many times on the trail, because it's not just people, the party can vote. You can have independents vote.
Right.
That may tilt that vote toward her. Whether Nikki Haley can best Governor DeSantis, we'll watch for that in New Hampshire. Whether she can be really competitive against the former president, interesting as well. What about those who watch broadcasts like these and say, who are you kidding? Donald Trump's got this thing locked up for the GOP nomination.
Well, you know, I'll be an old school American here and go with nothing's settled until the voters go to the polls. Right. And it's that simple. And that's what this process is all about. So Donald Trump doesn't have anything locked up yet. And I think that his voters need to be careful that they don't get so comfortable they start not showing up, not just in Iowa, but in the other states, because they start taking his victory for granted.
Grade Governor DeSantis' performance on the trail this year. If you could wind the clock back, every campaign would like to do that, except the winning one. What would you say were the strategic, tactical things that have put him in a place where right now he's shoved all the chips to the table, we'll have to see where it play. But if you were advising him, what would you say you went wrong?
Well,
and went right?
Well, there have been a lot of criticisms about his inability to show a bit of a personality on the trail. You know, one example of that came last week when we had tornadoes hit the Panhandle. He gave a really quick press conference, hopped on his private plane, and went back to Iowa. You know, I'm surprised he didn't get more grief from that from the other candidates, that he didn't, at least for a brief period of time, stop by the Panhandle to, you know, say he was there to help those folks there. But more than that, I think, you know, he has had this deep hatred for media. Now, it's been interesting the last few weeks. Suddenly he can't get on CNN and MSNBC and all the mainstream media often enough to sit in for very, very long interviews and stuff. But, you know, those things are important to a candidate. You can't just rely on a little group of conservative media outlets when you're trying to reach a broader electorate. And when you get to New Hampshire, as you pointed out, it's not just Republican voters, it's independent voters. And I also think that he surrounded himself, frankly, with a bunch of amateurs when it came to presidential campaigns. And I also think he doesn't really listen to those folks. He needed to put people around him that will actually say to him, no, you can't do that, you have to do this.
And very briefly, before we go to break, there's been an argument he tried to out-Trump Trump, be to the right of Trump on issues where most people said, if we want that, we'll vote for Donald Trump in the GOP ranks. Do you see some of that there?
Sure, and you know, their whole theme all along was that Trump would collapse, that with all these indictments, with all of this drama, that voters would eventually say, we can't deal with this anymore. Ron DeSantis is Trump, we'll take him.
And that hasn't, to this point,
hasn't happened
played
so
out.
far.
We'll have more from you on state politics. That coming up in just a moment. Florida legislature in full swing. More with Brian after the break.